Hi everyone, welcome to BRICS Briefs, your weekly dose of all things BRICS. Each week we're diving into the hearts of the BRICS nations, bringing you fresh news, insights and happenings that are shaping our world. In this week's episode, Rod McKenzie from ScoBricsInsight.com is still with us. Hi Rod.
Hi Clive, good to be here.
Great to have you. Rod's going to share his insights and so that's very much appreciated. So the topics we've got today in this episode, we've got funny banks and failed sanctions, unilateral sanctions, a smorgasbord for the merchants of chaos, energy independence crushing Europe, war for profit instead of BRICS for development, high risk for defending yourself from bullies, the challenges of being BRICS. So that's what we've got in store. I've got a lot of stuff here, so we're going to try and get through it under an hour. We may not be successful, but we'll give it a try. So here we go. So we're going to start off with the Think BRICS Substack, and so this was a pretty popular article from the 30th of April, so a little bit more than a week, but it's titled "Surprise: European Banks Are Making Billions in Russia." So this is the war profiteering, right? But there's a little bit more to it. So Western banks face a delicate balance between profiting from Russia and avoiding geopolitical tensions. Corporations balance visibility and ethics, often twisting to align profits with morality. So I'm just going to read a couple of highlights here. So despite the pressure to cut back, several major Western banks have kept up their activities and seen big jumps in profits and tax contributions to the Russian government. So obviously this is controversial. Collectively, these banks made a whopping €3 billion in profits in 2023, a big jump from what they made from before the war. So here, a big reason for this is Austria's Raiffeisen Bank International, which alone accounted for half of the taxes paid by Western banks to the Russian government. So RBI's profits in Russia shot up to €1.8 billion from 2021 to 2023, which shows how profitable it is for them to stay in the market. This profit surge is due to higher interest rates in Russia and the limited competition due to sanctions on Russian banks, which have given Western banks an edge in the Russian market. So just a little bit more, you see Anastasia there. The banks are making more money, so they're paying more taxes to the Russian government. Last year, they gave the government over €800 million. It's a lot. The strategic importance of these banks, just to highlight here, extends beyond financial metrics. For instance, Raiffeisen plays a big part in helping international transactions involving Russia go through, which is important given the restrictions on most of the Russian financial sector, including the exclusion from the SWIFT international payment system. So they're sort of hard not to, right? Just another highlight here. Deutsche Bank, for instance, is facing a potential €1.3 billion lawsuit over its acquisition of Postbank. The decision to stay or leave Russia is a big ethical and strategic dilemma for these banks. On the one hand, their financial success in Russia supports their global business models. On the other hand, it draws criticism and potential legal challenges. The bank's role in facilitating financial transactions that indirectly support the Russian economy amid a geopolitical conflict adds another layer of complexity to this issue. So what do you think about that, Rod? This is obviously
Raiffeisen Bank have been established in Russia for some considerable time. But if we just take the recently, it's actually a bridge between Russia and the West for companies that are not sanctioned and need to make payments to the West and receive payments from the West, for products such as fertilizers and other goods and food production, for example, that are not actually sanctioned. Now, although sanctions are applied to all the Russian banks and the state banks, etc., there is a need for a way for payments. And Sberbank, the largest bank, one of its subsidiaries is actually allowed to make transactions with the US for the sale of things like uranium, enriched uranium to the US, and fertilizers, etc. So, criticism is widespread in general without people actually looking at the specifics. Trade between Russia and the EU still continues. For example, the Ukraine transits 40 million cubic meters of gas every day from through its transit system to the west, and it gets paid for that. Now, if Russia didn't pay them, they wouldn't transit it. So how do they get paid? They get paid by a Russian bank. They don't get paid by the other side who receives the gas, because they pay Russia. So how will they pay if there's no channel? So there has to be some channels available for them to pay, and that's really what's happening.
Right. Well, because like I said, we're getting a little bit deep here. So this is a sort of exclusive. The producer brought this to our attention. So Interfax, this is a Russian media. So 25th April, UniCredit Bank takes German UniCredit Bank to court to recover about 170 million euro in counter guarantees. So it's just a very short article, but I've just highlighted here. UniCredit Bank filed a claim to recover about 175 million euros of debt under counter guarantees from the German UniCredit Bank. Information in the arbitration case file says this. So UniCredit Bank is demanding that its sister structure recover debt and interest for untimely fulfillment of obligations under 4 counter guarantees for approximately 175 million euros. So the court has scheduled an interview with the parties and a preliminary hearing of the cases for June 14th, so not far. If the parties fail to appear and there are no statements of objection, the case will be considered on its merits at a hearing on June 14th. So I don't know if it's clear to the audience, but UniCredit in Russia.
Two parts of the bank arguing with each other over the implementation. Basically, the two different jurisdictions, the German jurisdiction and obviously the Italian jurisdiction of the different parts of the bank, are acting according to whatever local laws. And again, like all the sanctions policy, none of it actually is unified. There are all 6s and 7s on who implements what and to what degree. And that's really what this whole fighting is about. It's not about who owes money. It's money it's owed, but should it be paid to this company because they're part of this or that? It's everything about the whole sanctions regime has been so opaque on the financing of it. That nobody really knows what the rules are. I'll say laws, but there are actually no laws on sanctions because they're never been implemented under international law. These are arbitrary sanctions imposed by the EU.
So I've heard that they are actually illegal. Unilateral sanctions are actually illegal.
Yes, correct. They are illegal. Sanctions can only be applied by the United Nations in international law, but any country can sanction another and then bully. For example, the US implements sanctions not because they're international law, it's because like Cuba or Iran or whatever, they have decided against it. Now, the penalty for the sanctions is not being allowed to use the US dollar or the SWIFT banking system. So that's the sanction. So it's a threat to be withdrawn from the financial system, not under international law, but because America says so.
Then that's the thing to me, is they, you confirm this, that unilateral sanctions are against the law, but obviously, laws have been put in for reasons, even international law. And so you're seeing this chaos, right? In the commercial, the banking, and it's like, this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing it's chaotic.
That was Clive. It's about the reason for this is none of the sanctions that were imposed on Russia were actually thought through thoroughly. They thought that they would impose them, Russia would collapse and immediately beg for mercy. And then there would be no need for sanctions. Unfortunately, the boomerang sanctions, as we tend to refer to them, have boomeranged back. And instead of having the desired effect of demolishing the Russian economy, they've demolished the Western economies. So in that sense, they are still discovering the downside, or it's what we call the law of unintended consequences.
Yeah, Europe is definitely facing that. So, and this is, we're on the banksters right now. So I've got to watch that adverts. So this is from May 2nd. So Russian court cancels seizure of some JP Morgan funds in VTB dispute. So I've just highlighted a few things here. A Russian court has cancelled the seizure of part of JP Morgan's funds in Russia in a lawsuit brought by state lender VTB. The court had ordered the seizure of funds in JP Morgan accounts after VTB sued it for $439.5 million. The amount it says was blocked by the US bank in its correspondent account in New York when the Russian lender came under sanctions. Hopefully you can follow that.
Basically, they may have cancelled the order, but that doesn't mean that JP Morgan's going to get its money back any more than VTB is going to get its money out of New York. These legal cases are going to take forever, and it's a game, and it's a game that's going to continue, and the only people who are actually going to make any money out of it are the lawyers.
Yes, exactly right. So which is where we're referring to merchants of chaos, right? Where there's chaos, there's people making money from it. And this gets thicker, actually. So it's foreigners who hold such accounts cannot move the money abroad, but nor can it be seized, according to presidential decrees, which is what Rod was just saying. So in its latest ruling, the Russian court reversed the seizure of the money in JP Morgan's Type C account and freed the bank's Russian subsidiary from to make payments of staff wages and taxes from a separate current account. I shouldn't laugh, but it's just ridiculous. Like you say, right? It's just unbelievable. Yeah, but I mean, the banks, like you say, it's caught up, right? It's all caught up. The banks are like, what do we do?
It's all caught up because there were no rules of engagement to cover these sort of eventualities. So everybody's now making it up as they go along and attempting to try and deal with it. And this is why you get situations like you've got, and that's just going to be the tip of the iceberg. Things are just going to continue that. I mean, there are huge amounts of Western capital that were invested in Russian bonds or Russian companies, etc., are all still tied up in this. And that money cannot be repatriated to the West. So, it's basically, it's not frozen, but it just can't be removed. So it's effectively sitting there in a similar way to the assets of Russia sitting in Euroclear or in Clearstream. It's sitting there, it's accumulating interest and it's whatever, but, I mean, there's no way that they can use it. And I understand that a fair number in Europe from the ECB downwards are saying, no, you can't use the money from that's frozen from Russia to help Ukraine. And even using the interest is certainly not something that they would encourage.
Right. Yes, because they were saying they can't move the money, and it's parked with the Russian central bank, which has a very high interest. So they're actually earning quite good interest
they're earning
on it.
money from it, but they can't do anything with the money. Yeah.
So it's like, we're saying like these banksters, but they're caught in their own trap. I mean, this is the funny part, right? We're not just saying it's funny because we're making fun of this actually very devastating situation for Ukraine and Russia, because people have been dying in Russia too, right? We had the terrorist attack there. So just to clarify, right? We're not laughing at this situation. We're actually
laughing at the absurdity of it.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So, but I sort of want to be a little bit helpful for our audience too. And this is, and you can see all the links will be below. But this is by Clifford Chance. It's a report of the actual sanctions. So it actually gives you. I mean, this is quite valuable for large businesses or people who are doing exports. But it actually goes over the actual sanctions and gives an update. So it says here it was published on 1st of May, and since our last summary on the 18th of April. So this can be quite helpful for those people that are trying to navigate these sanctions, which, as we've just shown, is actually quite difficult. So hopefully that's helpful for the audience. But I just wanted to, this is a recent document where they've made energy to do with the sanctions. So they've made energy an exception. So it's legal stuff. But I just wanted to sort of show the audience that this is actually saying that there's an exception for energy. This is recent, so 29th of April, 2024. I think it's until November 4th, 2024. You're going to have...
Wouldn't it, Clive? November the 5th, there's an important date in the calendar this year of the US, so it would be November the 4th that this would be valid until.
Right. Yes, that would be the presidential election in USA, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so we know what's going on there. All right. So we're just trying to be helpful there. I thought this was interesting. So just the 3rd of May, an article from TASS. China may review its US investment after Washington's new sanctions on Russia. So we go here. CEO of Navigator Principal Investors, Kyle Shostak, told TASS in an interview. So, quote, in response to these measures by the US, China will reconsider the structure of its investment in US sovereign debt. Shostak maintained, quote, this in turn will affect the US economy as it will be difficult to replace Chinese investments, at least in a comparable volume. So on May 1st, the US Department of Treasury unveiled a fresh package of anti-Russian sanctions. The new list includes 29 individuals and more than 250 legal entities from several countries, including China. They say they're targeting Russia's defense industry and sources of supply, which obviously most of the audience would have heard about. But they may not have heard that they actually are targeting China with these sanctions. And China's not reacting too well. We've got Xi in Europe right now on a tour.
I think that's very interesting where he's visiting. He's visiting Hungary, Serbia, and France. Now, Serbia, we can understand it's 25 years since the NATO bombing of Serbia when they actually bombed the Chinese embassy. So I think that's a nod to the Serbs, and we know how you feel. With Hungary, it's part of the One Belt, One Road initiative, and is a standout against sanctions policy and the seizing of Russian assets to fund the Ukraine. And Macron seems to be the one who is standing up to say, well, hang on, we don't want to burn our bridges with China as we've done with Russia and put all our eggs into the basket with the North Atlantic. So I think that's the three crucial things. I mean, Scholz made a visit to China a couple of weeks ago where he was, let's say he wasn't the most warmly welcomed visitor in recent years. So you would have expected Xi maybe to have reciprocated by spending 24 hours or 36 hours or so in Germany, but there's no visit of Xi to Germany, just to France. And I did notice that in the photo opportunity that von der Leyen was invited along with Macron to meet with Xi. And I don't think that Xi takes her very seriously. It was a
No.
matter of courtesy. The French had invited us, so they were being polite.
Yeah, interesting. There's a lot going on. I wanted to give everyone a quick lesson from Australia, all right, because I think this is very important. It's a bit of historical context. This is from the 25th of October 2022. That date is not really that relevant, but I wanted to give, because we have a very large English audience, so the title is Ideological Extortion, Not Ukraine, to blame for skyrocketing Australian energy prices, because they are, and they're skyrocketing in Europe too. But I wanted people to understand why this actually happens. I'm going to show you an example, an historical example of exactly what happened. So these highlights. A government policy set more than 40 years ago that used economic ideology. All right, so we're talking about skyrocketing Australian energy prices. In 1978, Australia was self-sufficient enough in oil that local fuel prices were much lower than most of the rest of the world. The maximum petrol price in Australia was 21 cents per litre. So of special note here, the price of coal and gas was also based on local production costs and local demand, combined with the fact that all electricity utilities were state-owned, as was the coal and gas. So the inputs were kept as cheap as possible. Now, then Treasurer John Howard decided that Australians paying Australian prices for Australian petrol and diesel was a problem. He proposed that Australia should adopt, quote, import parity pricing. Local fuel prices should be set at what it costs to import fuel from overseas. So tax revenue and more profits for the oil companies producing oil in Australia. That's what was going on. So a little bit further, he announced a plan that all Australian produced crude oil would have to start being sold to local refineries at the same price as it cost to import crude oil from overseas. It meant consumers would have to start paying prices based on world oil prices. They'd no longer be able to enjoy cheap oil from their own domestic supply. So this John Howard announced at the time, subsidised Indigenous oil prices encouraged a wasteful use of a key energy resource and inhibited the adoption of more energy-efficient processes and technologies. So he gives an ecological argument to justify his ideological economic attack on Australians paying a reasonable price for their own resource. So, and just to be clear here, there was no actual subsidy, as the domestic price was the market price based on the actual extraction cost of locally produced oil. Howard invented a fictional subsidy argument by redefining the market as the world market, not the domestic market. So anyway, I wanted to bring that up. What do you think of that, Rod? I don't know if you're aware of it.
I totally agree with you that it was an ideological extortion and a total distortion of economics. Now, here in Russia, for example, natural gas is a resource that comes from out under the ground. Where I live, beneath the great steppe and the rich black soil is oil and gas. Now that's extracted and it's owned by the people, right? But the gas companies, etc., they extract it, they make up money from it, they pump the gas to what we call a heating station here, which provides a communal heating to the whole neighborhood. Now that's based on the cost of gas extraction and processing. That's about it. And it goes to the people. The price of gas in Russia is well under $100 per 1,000 cubic meters, right? The average price on the transfer title facility in Holland, where they trade natural gas, is $400. Right. So that's the natural price of gas in Russia. And the gas companies are basically told, this is what you can charge for utilities, and you get an allowance for a level of inflation on an annual basis, but that's it, right? and it belongs to the people. It's a resource that belongs to the people, and the people should benefit from it.
Yeah.
That was ideologically based theft, forcing Australians to them. Now, yes, okay, we use energy here. I mean, within Russia, they're now using natural gas to heat greenhouses and power greenhouses to grow fruit and vegetables that they wouldn't otherwise grow because the energy is cheap. Now, it's clean energy. Natural gas is a clean burning fuel, no matter what they say, right? So we have a lot of transport here, public transport, that's powered by liquefied natural gas. Again, it's cleaner and more efficient than petrol, right? So, you know, that is just piracy. And countries like Russia, with its resources, use them for the benefit of the people, not to further their ideological aims of a green new tomorrow. We only have to look at what the green new present is like in the West, particularly Germany, where they're deindustrializing because their major industries cannot afford to power. Their fertilizer industry is gone. Its chemical industries are emigrating to either China or to the US because they can't afford the energy costs. So much for this green new revolution that was going to be cheaper and better. It's more expensive and worse.
Yeah, and just to clarify with the audience too, it is we have our opinions, and there is many scientists, and it's not that we avoid this subject, as Rod has made his opinion clear, but it's that it is quite a complex subject. There's a lot of variables, and we want to do it justice, and we will be addressing this in the context of BRICS and geopolitics, but we're going to do it in a way that is sensitive to different people's views from different levels of society, also from their views of a commercial background. So I just wanted to make that clear to the audience that we understand, but it is a complex issue. So we'll continue. I thought
it's not a complex issue if people in Europe can't afford to heat or eat. That's the choice that a lot of people are facing. That's nothing ideological about that. That's financial, and that's a human right. Every person needs energy, food, and access to clean water to be living in a civilized society.
I agree. I think most people would agree with that if they care about their fellow human beings. And so, but anyway, you know, we're trying to be sensitive to the audience because we want our audience to understand that there's a lot of different views, and what we're doing here at Think BRICS is we're trying to lead an optimistic view, but also be, you know, analysis, insights like from what Rod brings from his a lot of years of experience. But yeah, you know, it is what it is right now. But I'm going to bring up the next article, and I thought it's not really so much related, but I thought it was quite interesting, you know. So this one is from 5 days ago. The Maldives ditches dollar. If you don't know where the Maldives is, this is the Maldives, so a chain of islands off the coast of south of India. You would have heard of them. Very beautiful, apparently. So it says here, each year the Maldives sends a cool 780 million to India for imports. Instead of paying in dollars, they're now in talks to use their own money, the Maldivian rupiah. Hopefully I got that right. This isn't a spontaneous decision. The groundwork was laid back in 2023 when India greenlit special Vostro bank accounts in the Maldives. The Reserve Bank of India has been promoting the Indian rupee in bilateral agreements, suggesting a mutual comfort in moving away from the dollar. So there you go. That's the Maldives. Take your holidays.
Well, that's hardly surprising because India, very much part of the de-dollarization as part of the BRICS and the drive for that, will start doing that. And we've already discussed in other programs the fact that other countries that are not necessarily part of the BRICS but trade heavily with the BRICS will start doing the same, where the transition to trading in mutual currencies, national currencies, is going to be the future. And as we discussed, come October in Kazan, we'll see how that's really going to pan out and what the major plan is. But the Maldives is just another of those. Is why do they have to change their currency into a dollar to trade with India when their biggest trading partner, they can easily trade with the rupees and their own currency?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems silly. Why go through a third party when you can just go direct? Okay, I'll go. So that's the Maldives. You want to go on holiday? So there you go. Well, still on India. So I thought this was interesting because obviously, and I know Rod has some insight to this too. See the big tanker there, but this is an article from 25th April. India grants marine insurance approval for Russian firms. So I'll just highlight a little bit here. India has granted marine insurance approval to 4 Russian firms, adding impetus to Moscow's effort to avoid the use of Western service providers. So this is insurance. That was definitely an issue, Rod. I know you talked about this with me too.
Yeah, it's very much an issue. And it was one of the ways that they felt that their sanctions on Russia and their price cap at $60 a barrel export would work, was Russians would need to be insured, the tankers, through the Lloyd's of London and the major insurance groups that through London. Russia bypassed that using other countries and intermediaries. So India has just basically stepped up to the plate and said, okay, we are one of the largest importers of Russian oil. We will handle the insurance ourselves.
Makes sense. Why wouldn't you, right?
And I did notice an article the other day where the insurers in London from the international insurance groups were complaining that their loss of revenue was substantial to their whole business, but with the loss of such a huge amount of money that they were losing by the fact that the Russians were no longer using their services as insurers. So again, we reached the point where it's the law of unintended consequences. Is you want to whack a mole here and another one appears somewhere else.
Yep, they're still going to do it because they need it, which is what you were sort of saying before. They got their basic needs, shelter, food, right? You can't stop people from, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep doing it.
The other thing about India importing Russian oil, yes, the US was bleating about it, but the US, as well as everybody else knows, if you remove Russian oil from the market, the price would shoot up, right? Because it represents such a substantial share of the world market for oil. So you remove that, then the amount of oil available in the market shrinks and the price goes up. So plus the fact that India was getting a level of a discount for that oil meant that they were more than happy to take it. Now its refining capacity is much larger than it needs for its domestic industries and its domestic consumption. So it refines large amounts of oil and then sells it on as petroleum products to other parts of the world, including the USA.
Which actually, I've got an article about that. So it was on the 2nd of May. India resumes purchasing Russian crude oil. And they say, it's a very short article. Indian Oil Corp resumed its purchase of Russian crude oil transported via a tanker owned by Sovcomflot this week, marking a significant step toward restoring oil flows between Russia and India. I don't know whether they have actually stopped or not. The decision by India's largest refiner to accept a Sovcom tanker is notable as it may encourage other smaller refineries to also utilize Sovcomflot vessels for their Russian oil purchases. So they're all getting into it. Here we go. Deliveries of Urals and Sokol have notably increased month on month, while shipments from Iraq and Saudi Arabia, India's second and third largest oil suppliers, have decreased. So furthermore, at least 5 Sovcomflot tankers carrying Urals are indicating India as their destination this month, with the tanker Sovirovsky Prospect currently anchored off the country's west coast. So I know you know a lot about this, Rod. Maybe You
Yeah,
could tell.
I mean, basically,
Yeah.
there was a level of pressure applied by the ubiquitous Mr. Blinken saying, don't buy this, and pressure on the banks in the United Arab Emirates and other places to stop trading with the Russian companies or accepting payments through to or from Russian entities dealing in oil. Now, some may have agreed to that, but others, they just changed the bank. I mean, basically, there are enough banks out there in each of the countries. So one of them's under a level of pressure, and it just swaps the business with another bank. And so it's again what I mentioned about 5 minutes ago, a whack-a-mole type of thing. Once you try and close a loophole with a entity, another loophole appears with another entity. So you're not going to stop this, and if anything, the whole thing's going to widen to the point where these sanctions are just getting ignored.
Yeah, they'll find ways, and then they'll establish those ways, right, into making it happen somehow. Yeah, no. Well, good, because that's, let them do with them what they. This is sort of on this subject, right, with the oil, because obviously this is what we're talking about, sort of profiteering, and then the sanctions not actually working, right? It's just causing chaos, and they're getting around it. People are getting frustrated. So this is on the 2nd of May, this article, BRICS. Russia's oil and gas revenues soaring despite sanctions. So despite US sanctions, Russia defies forecasts and exhibits even stronger economic health in 2024. A 100% annual increase in its oil and gas revenues. 100%. From $7 billion the previous year, its turnover on oil and gas jumps to $14 billion in April 2024. So it's not working.
Well,
I
it's
think
not
that's
just it's not working. It's the oil price has gone up as economies have recovered post-COVID and are expanding again. China, India, etc. So consequently, the price of oil, because of the OPEC plus cuts to production, the limited amount of oil that is there means the price rises. So when you were looking at in 2022, early 23, oil being at $55, $60 a barrel, you're now looking at over $80 a barrel. Now, if your lift cost of oil and after your taxes, etc., is budgeted on $45, $50 a barrel, so pretty much everything over that price, $60 a barrel, is excess profit.
right. And then you have like you were saying, India imports and they resell it, and they're getting a large, nice margin. So they're going to go, well, let's sell more, right? So buy more, sell more, sell on more.
Yeah, I mean, oil has been up in the middle 80s, and it also continued to be there. I mean, JP Morgan in an article the other day said that they expect it to be over 90, possibly 100 by the end of the summer, really depending on a number of circumstances.
Right, because in the Northern Hemisphere, you're going to have more activity, right, during the spring, summer.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So still going on this, because there's this article from the 2nd of May. So Russia's gas giant posts first loss since 1990s. So I've got a few things here, but Rod actually has some insight. So I'm just going to, actually, you just kick in whenever you want, Rod. Russian energy major Gazprom reported its first annual loss since 1999 on Thursday. So it sounds very significant, right? Until you get the inside news from Rod. According to the state-owned company's earnings report, Gazprom posted a net loss of 629 billion rubles. So just here, Russia's gas exports to its traditional markets in the EU have dwindled due to sanctions. So, however, Gasprom has reoriented its energy trade to Asia, with China emerging as one of its largest buyers. The volume of Russian gas supplies to China could reach nearly 100 billion cubic meters annually when the Power of Siberia pipelines are fully operational. So that's the pipeline from Russia to China. Once that happens, China will fully substitute the EU in terms of purchases of Russian gas, according to Gazprom. So But yes, this is not as simple as it sounds, because you were saying there's
yeah, I mean, in these figures, Gazprom posted its first loss. There's a number of write-offs in there that they're not taking into account. Now, they're writing off assets, which then contribute towards the loss. I mean, for example, Gazprom trading and export in Germany was nationalized by the German government. It wasn't confiscated, it was nationalized. They took it away, right? And they're now operating parts of it that were there. Now, that was rather lucrative. So gas came into Germany via the Nord Stream pipeline. And if it wasn't being utilized by the long-term contract, Gazprom trading would then sell that gas on, right? So obviously the Nord Stream is no longer there, but the gas still does tend to end up through either the Ukraine system, which is 40 million cubic meters per day, and also through the Turkish stream, which goes through the Balkans up to Serbia and onto Hungary. So that's another 40 million cubic meters a day. Now that adds up to about 20 billion cubic meters per year, if you work it out over the daily, weekly, monthly basis. So it's a loss is mainly write-offs and not a lot to do with the lack of profit. I mean, you've got to remember what the price it gets for the gas it is shipping is more than 3 times what it was getting before under the long-term contract.
Right. So it's a bit unexpected to have a loss, but that's what you were saying, right? There's write-offs with the accounting, right? So they're saying, yeah, there's losses, but there's different types of losses.
Well, it comes down to the bottom line loss, but the bottom line loss is it didn't lose money on its whole business. It was it's a paper loss, if you like.
Paper loss, right?
Write off an asset, you're not losing money. You're just writing off the value of an asset and selling it off for tax purposes.
Yes, which is done very regularly in big companies.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is, but when you were telling me this before, and now we've shared it with the audience, I thought, well, that's, unless you know about these things in the background and have experience with it, you wouldn't think about that. So yeah, this is why we love having Rod on.
Yeah, there's obviously going to be other losses that are going to be posted. The cost, Gazprom was a 50% owner in Nord Stream, as in 1, and it was a 51% owner in Nord Stream 2. Now, the total value of those pipelines, its share of them was a minimum of 22 billion. And they haven't written that off yet. Now, they were going to have to be written off at some point because the assets are no longer functioning and they can't. So I don't know where, when and if they're going to do that. There was an insurance case that was brought by Gazprom in the High Courts of London, but that got nowhere. The insurance companies claimed it was an act of war, yet none of the so-called protagonists are involved in any war with Russia. So how they can come to that, I don't know. But again, that's something for another program.
Yes, yeah, and we'll bring it to you. So I'm still continuing here, and hopefully I'm not going on too long, but we are going to end off pretty soon. But just wanted to bring home this. So Gazprom, this is a couple of weeks ago. So Gazprom's subsidiary ordered to stop Russian lawsuit against UniCredit. Okay, so the subsidiary was ordered by the UK Supreme Court to stop suing Italian bank UniCredit in Russia over an aborted gas project. So they've launched multiple lawsuits in the Russian courts, but the Western sanctions halted work on the project, on the plant. So it says the company, which is 50% owned by Gazprom, sued UniCredit for about 450 million euros in August of 2023 after the Italian bank refused to pay bank guarantees linked to the project, citing Western sanctions. Right, this is the chaos of these unilateral sanctions. UniCredit obtained an anti-suit injunction in London, preventing Roskilde from pursuing its case. So they tried to overturn that decision at the UK Supreme Court last week, but its appeal was dismissed on Tuesday.
So there's a surprise, Clive. A
Yeah.
Russian company's appeal was dismissed in a Western court. Wow. Who would have guessed
Right.
that?
I wonder that they even tried, but I guess you sort of have to follow through, don't you? It says
London up until recently was always where international contracts, specifically between Russian and international partners, was done according to UK law, and disputes would be settled in the High Courts of Justice in the UK, because British justice was held up as an example of impartiality. Sadly, that seems to be a thing of the past.
Yeah, it has, unfortunately, yeah, because that is definitely a standard, that lends dignity and also integrity to any process that you can depend upon as a standard. And when
Correct.
that goes, laws are a standard. So, yeah, a little bit here. The case is in the latest of a series of lawsuits after German industrial gas company Linz, in a decision in May 22 to halt work on the LNG plant after it was advised that the export of LNG would breach European Union sanctions. Just a little bit further, Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank have also obtained orders from the English courts to try and prevent Roskilde from suing them in Russia. Other Western institutions have also been trying to stop Russian litigation via the London courts. So among them, Barclays, last week was granted an extension of an interim injunction obtained against Russian lender Sovcombank. So yeah, it just keeps going. I'm sorry to sort of harp on that. I probably shouldn't have bring that up, but just to...
No, I think you're correct. I mean, basically, the courts are saying sanctions are sanctions, although, as we discussed right in the beginning, these sanctions have no legal standing in international law. So it's now down to the UK courts interpreting the law in a way that the law does not exist. They're saying EU sanctions are law when they're not actually law, they're directives.
Right. Yes. So that's interesting, actually. I've got this article where it says here, this is on the 6th of May, so yesterday, German Uniper demands 15 billion from Gazprom for undelivered gas. This is just crazy, but I'm gonna...
Okay. Now that is because they had to buy gas on the open market after the Nord Stream pipelines were blown up. And Gazprom had contractually agreed to provide this gas. Now, Uniper had to then buy it on the spot market at 4 times the price than the long-term contract. So it's saying, we lost all this money, so you've got to pay us. Now, that's a bit like saying to the delivery truck driver, I had to buy more bread on the open market to sell in my bakery because you didn't deliver the bread.
Yeah, it's just... That's crazy.
He's suing the delivery mechanism and owner of the bread truck for the fact that he had to buy bread to sell to his consumers from a third-party source because he didn't provide the gas. Because either his government was a part of the parties that blew up the Nord Stream pipelines.
Yeah. So it gets even more complex when you have terrorism.
That is how absurd it has become, Clive. They are suing because he didn't deliver the gas, but they couldn't deliver the gas because his government was a party to whoever blew up the gas pipeline. Yeah.
So this is, we have this absolute chaotic situation. So I think we've definitely brought it home for the audience, which is good. I won't keep harping on that. I think I've got a couple more articles, but I think, look, this is just a little bit about China, having China goes underground on unanswered bank calls for Russia payments. So they're having issues. There's the Russian sanctions, and then because it's worldwide sanctions sort of thing with the payment system, China's businesses are having trouble because they can't use the payment system. So this is just pushing people away from the Western payment systems, SWIFT and such, making it more difficult. People are going to find other ways. So anyway, I think let's leave it there. But Rod, let's get your final comments.
Yeah, I mean, de-dollarization is only going to accelerate. Payments in national currencies and the development of payment systems for national currencies between counterparties is certainly on the increase. And that's not just because of sanctions, it's because of it's something that's been there, but it was convenient before sanctions to keep the status quo. Now the status quo has become untenable for many of the players, and there are cheaper alternatives. So they're now exploring these cheaper alternatives, and they will get away from the bullying and the dominance of the geriatric seven and their leader, the so-called hegemon, the US, from bullying the rest of the world by the use of their currency. I mean, why should companies and countries have to transfer their currency into dollars to trade with another company or a country? It's absurd. And
It is.
the costs involved, particularly if your currency gets attacked by speculators, etc., causes immense problems. It'd be far easier to do it with them. And if they fix your currency against a basket of commodities, and that way you could have a basket of commodities, fix each currency to a basket fixed of currencies. So, if in Russia it's 6,000 rubles to 1 gram of gold, it could be 53 yen for the same thing. So you know exactly what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with the dollar.
Yeah. And as you have said, in Kazam, we're probably most likely going to hear what the implementation of the plans that they've talked about for a while. So that's going to be good.
It will be the plan for when they roll it out. This is what they've decided. And I look forward to that decision. And I think not only do you and I, the members of the BRICS, but the whole global South and the rest of the world be sitting there with bated breath thinking, this could be the future.
Yeah, I like it. An optimistic future. Well, thank you very much again, Rod, for your time. I really appreciate it. I'll end off here. So thank you. Thanks for tuning in to BRICS Briefs. If you've enjoyed this dive into the multipolar world and wish to join the conversation, please comment below. Please like and share this video to spread it as far as possible. You can follow us on our Substack and other social media platforms, all linked below. Stay curious, stay connected, stay optimistic. Let's keep exploring together. Ciao.